This is an interview with Christopher Kueny about his recollections, if he can remember them, of GROW, the Grassroots Organizing Workshop. We're recording February 20th in the year 2022. Welcome, Chris.
Hi.
So do you remember anything about the experiences at GROW? And if so, start at the beginning. How did you find out about it? Where were you coming from? Did you finish college?
Okay, I was an undergraduate student at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And we had a student activist organization there called Students Against Militarism. We were primarily active in pro-Palestinian and trying to protest against the wars in Latin America. And at some point there was a conference in Atlanta called Southern Student Activist Network. And Mark Beatty and I went to that. Mark now owns his very successful plastic surgery practice in downtown Atlanta. But we went to that conference and we sat through it. And I remember when we were leaving the conference, the main thing I remember from the ride home was saying, you know what? The only damn thing worthwhile about that conference was meeting Michael Gooding. And so I graduated from Chapel Hill and I had been working with a Lebanese professor. His name was Dr. Edward Elias Azar. And he had a conflict and peace data bank and was a conflict and peace political science professor. And so when I graduated, he had wanted a progressive to be the chairman of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill Department of Political Science. And since the department pretty much ran almost 100% on the overhead from his grants, he thought he had a strong position for that. Instead, they put in a very conservative guy. So he took a job at the University of Maryland, College Park, as the director for the Center for International Development. And I went up there as his assistant after I graduated. And everything was fine for many months. He had his graduate assistants from Duke and Chapel Hill there. Including Mohammed Said, who I used to hear on NPR every once in a while. And when he found out he had cancer, under Sadat, he opened a non-governmental newspaper and he died of cancer not too long after that, but it was his last act of defiance. Well, Dr. Azar was gay and had a nice boyfriend in Chapel Hill, but he didn't really meet anybody up in DC. And he started turning his affections inappropriately towards me, which led me to, at one point, lock my office door, after which point he broke the window on the door, knocking on it loud enough to try to get me to open it. At which point I decided I'd go away. And I had been corresponding, and for you young people, that means you take a piece of paper and you write stuff on it and then you put it in an envelope and mail it to him. And we were corresponding like that back and forth. And I had told him about the difficulties I was experiencing. And he said, hey, well, come down here. Reagan just got rid of Vista. We need somebody to help with this food co-op. We don't really have a place for you to live, but there's a vacant house next to my house that's got a lock on the door, but it's not a very big lock. And so I hitchhiked down. It took me, I was really stupid. I should have taken the damn metro to the south part of DC, but instead I just walked up to the College Park exit and got on the interstate. It took me a day to get to Chapel Hill. And then it took me 2 days to get from Chapel Hill to Columbia. I spent the night in a pine forest outside of Patrick. And got dropped off at the State House. Merle Truesdale came and picked me up, brought me to GROW, and there I was. And over the next
What
few
year
weeks,
was that, Chris?
I'm thinking 82.
Reagan's still in office.
Yeah. And well, it's shortly after Reagan dissolved Vista. So if we could figure that date out, that would help us. But anyway, so I broke the lock off the door on the wooden house, and I cleaned up the downstairs enough that they could have the food co-op there, because when they lost Vista, they lost their Vista volunteer, but they also lost their HUD house. So now they didn't have a person to help with it, nor did they have a place. So the local magistrate, Glenn Davis, and his girlfriend, Hattie Frooster, came and checked the place out and decided it was okay. And Grow had some of these 35-gallon drum wood heaters that I installed and cut firewood for. And I ended up moving into the upstairs. It didn't have any heat, but you know, if you got a big fire going downstairs, it would be tolerable. Plus we had plenty of blankets. And yeah, I would get one meal a day if I could make it into Grow. John Carpenter would cook me a vegan meal. I really learned.
Was that the house out on Bluff Road you're talking about?
Yes, next to the cinder block house that Michael Gooding lived in. And so
that the house that you're talking about, the wooden house, then became the Grow Food Co-op.
the downstairs did. The
Right.
upstairs became my residence, and then I shared the residence with other people from Grow. But it was a good way into town. And I'll tell you what, to learn about hunger is to not have eaten, get on the bus, get into Grow, and it's 5 minutes after John Carpenter stopped serving, so you're screwed. So you basically walk in expecting a meal and you're not given a meal. And that is a very, very special feeling that has given me empathy throughout my entire life, really. But I got $20 every 2 weeks from the food co-op. Plus I'd usually get a 50-pound bag of cabbage and some bunch of sweet potatoes, usually have those left over. On food co-op day, I'd take a pickup truck and I'd run to farmer's market, pick up bulk vegetables and Count's meat and pick up bulk meat. And
you were using putting food stamps in the bank and then being able to leverage the value of the food stamps with dollars, right?
I wasn't. Glenn Davis was. Yeah, this
Mhm.
was one of the only food stamps, and only food co-ops in the country that could take food stamps because it had been, I guess, because it had been organized through HUD. So yeah, we would collect $22 from everybody, and then we would allocate 20 of that towards actual food, and then the rest would go towards bags and I guess giving me my $20. And then I would work in the evenings later on at the Grow Cafe, serving beer to people like Venerable Tom Turnipseed. And then I guess the next major thing was the SRP6 thing.
What year was that, Chris?
SRP6, I think, was 83. I've got a good picture of it, though. I've got a picture of me with my arresting officer.
Well, they turn the pictures over. So what's your, like, the most vivid memory of the Grow building, the Grow Cafe, either both a political memory of something at Grow and then a cultural memory of something at Grow?
Well, I remember being shocked. This wasn't really a Grow, but more out at the Bluff Roadhouse, when I told people that, or when we mentioned, you know, that we were into punk rock. Well, the African-American community only had one definition for the word punk, and it had to do with being in prison. And so they were a little worried that we might, you know, they didn't really know what that meant exactly. They thought that we were into some kind of weird sexual thing, but we introduced, the cultural thing was we brought the first kind of punk bands and stuff to Grow Cafe. Before that, it was a lot of, you know, acoustic guitars and fun stuff. And it was all great. We would have all kinds of bands there, but we had a big punk rock party that I think was, and this was after Von Henman's had closed. I got there after Von Henman's, the punk club closed. So there was a good bit of people in Columbia that were looking for that. So that was kind of nice. Politically, I remember when we decided that the people that had the Superfund chemical dump out across from Westinghouse decided that the best thing they could do on a hot August day would bring all these Superfund chemicals right into the backyard of my neighborhood, which is right by Starlight and Bluff Estates. And then they would move it all really close to this African-American community and blow it up. And then when they blew it up, it would all go away. And I remember that we called out the National Guard, and we decided to slow that down. And so a bunch of us went out into the woods, and Brett went to the courthouse, and we got in the way of them blowing it up because we were going to get blown up too, and they were figured that'd be bad press. But I remember Sheriff Powell had a damn helicopter that could blast a siren that made it bounce off the ground, so it sounded like they were right in your backyard. I mean, right next to you. So I remember jumping in a damn ditch full of water and coming up behind some roots of a tree and sitting there for about 20 minutes waiting to hear people walking around. Never heard anything. So we eventually made our way out of the woods. By this time, Brett had gone to court, and we got kind of a mixed result from that. The Superfund people convinced the judge that as hot as it was and as volatile as these chemicals were, trying to move them back to the Superfund site could cause them to blow up and cause even worse damage than if, and make them blow up without all the explosive that's supposed to burn up all the chemicals, and it could be an even worse disaster. So they were given permission to blow those chemicals up, but they were also instructed that if they ever wanted to move any property, any of the toxins off of that property, they had to consult the National Guard, or basically get permission from Brett Bursey. So Brett Bursey would have time to go to court if they, in other words, they weren't allowed to do any surprise moves like that anymore. So that was a success in a way.
That's a wonderful memory. I'd forgotten all about that.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know about your time in the swamp there. That's quite moving.
Well,
so you want to fast forward to the bomb plant?
Yeah, it was already organized when I got there. It was a protest at the bomb plant, and there were many legal entities that were planning on coming, churches and peace groups. And in the past, they'd had people like, I guess, Bonnie Raitt and Jackson Browne play at these things, but I never when I was there. But so they had the permit to demonstrate on the front lawn of the Savannah River plant like they always have. And then just a little bit before that happened, got a call from SLED telling them that would violate your national security if they went on the front lawn, but not to worry. They found a fire ant infested briar patch that they could bush hog for us just fine. And it would make for a great place for a demonstration, only a couple miles from the bomb plant. So because of all the people who had been promised a legal demonstration, the legal demonstration was held in the fire ants and briars. But we did go up to SLED and tell them that this whole free speech zone thing was crap, and we wanted to get it before a judge. And so we told them the next day, 6 of us were going to actually go to the front lawn. Little did we realize that they were going to have a 3-foot wide yellow line painted halfway back from the street across the entire front lawn. and they had a crowd of people standing at the yellow line waiting for us. They ranged from the guy that looked like when Otis got to be a deputy on Andy Griffith to the DOE guy that had the little black curly thing in his ear. And I really wish we could have done it. There's a whole couple of scenarios I've gone through, and I would have loved it if we'd have gone up before the yellow line, spread out a big blanket, taken out a picnic basket, and just had a picnic. And they were like, but y'all didn't cross the line. It's like, yeah, I know. But anyway, we didn't do that. So we all just stepped across the line, and the Otis looking guy had cue cards, and he would say, do not step across the yellow line or you will be trespassing. And then, you know, you have stepped across the yellow. Finally, you are under arrest for trespass. And so we got taken into the DuPont building, and we got ourselves, as Arlo Guthrie would say, we got ourselves fingerprinted, photographed, and they shipped us off to Columbia jail. Now the fine on this hadn't been updated, so it was $1,000 fine, but there was no associated jail time with it. It wasn't $1,000 or 30 days. So we got to jail, and God bless her, Majeska Simpkins bailed us all out. And then they had a couple of hearings, and they, at some point, our attorneys said, well, we're all indigent. And they said, well, crap. And so they had to let us go because we don't have debtor's prison here. Well, we do, but we disguise it better than that. And so they had to let us go. And we waited, ended up having, we were able to get John Delgado. I mean, even today you look at it and it was a star-studded performance. We had Majeska Simpkins in the audience, along with a bunch of people from the Aiken area, as well as other people. We had Henry Dargon McMaster was our prosecutor. It was like the only thing he ever prosecuted as the U.S. attorney. Everything else he got other people to do. Our judge was Strom Thurmond's ex-law partner, Charlie Simons. And our defense attorney was one of the best defense attorneys in the state, John Delgado, for whose services we painted his house. Had a 2-day trial. After the first day, one of the local farmers slipped somebody $35 and says, here, have lunch on me, but don't tell anybody I gave it to you. Because although they supported us, it sure wasn't a popular thing in Aiken. And I remember at one point, we found out that Charlie Simons had stock in DuPont. So we had a press conference, and we said, yeah, we got arrested on DuPont property. We got booked in by DuPont security guards, got photographed in the DuPont mugshot room, and got fingerprinted in the DuPont fingerprint room. And now we're going to be charged. Now we're going to be tried in a DuPont town by a judge that owns stock in DuPont. Well, the very next hearing we had, Charlie Simons was very upset and swore that he'd sold his DuPont stock and he would not recuse himself. We had asked him to recuse himself based on that. So we had the trial, and we decided to get some big time guns on our side. So we invited Father Phil Berrigan, who of the Electric Boat Company fame. He was the one that paddled into the Electric Boat Company and poured his human blood down the launch tube of a Trident submarine and spray painted USS Auschwitz on the side, and then paddled over to shore, and the guards over there said, hey, you get out of here. You're not allowed to be in here. And he said, oh yeah, well, look at that submarine over there. Does it always say that? And they were like, hey, wait a doggone minute. You come back here. We're going to arrest you. So he got arrested for that. And somehow the Catholic Church kicked him out for that, from being a priest. But he came down, and we had what's his name? The epidemiologist who had blown the whistle on the Rocky Flats nuclear plant. Apparently there had been a plume of cancers downwind from this this new nuclear plant. And he brought it to the attention of his authorities and said, look, you got this public health problem here. You got this plume of radioactivity causing all this cancers down this line. And they said, no, we don't. It was Dr. Carl Johnson. And he said, well, yeah, you do. I mean, the data's right here. They said, no, we don't. Shut up. So he stopped being their epidemiologist and I guess became more of an activist. They both came down. I don't know how we paid for that or how they were lodged or anything. My biggest memory of their visit was I had built a raised bed garden out at the house on Bluff Road. And when he got there, I had enough produce that I was able to pretty much feed us out of that garden for that day, the one meal we had together. And Judge Simons did not let any of the testimony that we had go in front of the jury. In other words, Phil Berrigan couldn't testify in front of the jury. He had the jury recused or excused, and Carl Johnson couldn't testify in front of the jury. I guess it was a compromise to let him testify, but make sure it didn't help the case. But John Delgado was just so helpful. Like, if they would ask us a question, did you step over the yellow line? Well, the judge wanted me to say yes, but what we had been trained to say, well, you know that South Carolina has the highest infant mortality rate in the country, and yet within a half mile of the Savannah River plant, it's twice the state average. And so I felt compelled to step over that line to bring attention to this fact. And I was like, no, you're supposed to say yes or no. So anyway, we answered all of our questions that way. And after 2 days, the judge gave his final instructions to the jury, which were, if y'all don't find them guilty of trespassing, I'm gonna find each and every one of you in contempt of court. And they found us guilty. The other wonderful thing about it was one day we got in there before anybody else. We pulled back the curtain and there's a 1930s Works Progress Administration banner or mural painted. And it's a picture of insurrection. And the state of South Carolina couldn't do anything about it because it was federal property, but there was nothing that said they couldn't put a great big movie type curtain in front of it. So the back of the courtroom, instead of having this mural of insurrection, had this nice gray curtain, but we looked behind the curtain. And once again, since we were indigent, once we were found guilty, they let us go. And I'd say,
was John Penley at the trial? Let's back up on that piece.
the whole John Penley story is not something I'm real eager to talk about. John Penley jumped his bail. I think he did a year in the pen for that.
Really? I didn't know he did time. Did we
yeah.
lose any money?
Yes, she did.
She did.
And he apologized to her. And from what he says is, she says, honey, don't you worry about that. You just keep being an activist. And so he felt like that was kind of like his penance for jumping bail, is spend the rest of his life being an activist and a photographer of progressive movements. And that's what he did. Now he's in somewhat limited health, living out in Las Vegas, like a couple of miles from the VA hospital where he can get attention.
Well, I didn't know he was a veteran.
Yeah, he was a coastie.
He was a what?
Coast Guard, coastie. Coast Guard, the inshore
Oh,
Navy.
I got it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I saw him a couple years ago before the pandemic at Wendy's house. I don't know if you
I
made
was
it
there.
there.
I was there.
Well, Chris, I really do appreciate it because you've mentioned some things that I had to dust off, but I had forgotten completely. I forgot that that you were tried in the Aiken County Courthouse, and that mural, that we can use that mural. We got to use that mural somewhere. It's still there. We need another field trip. We will, I'm sure, come back and do more later, but Becky just wants some, a couple of quotes. And I think we've got some good ones from you because you remember some stuff that nobody else has. And can you send me high res photographs that you referred to? Not, I mean, they need to be like in the megabytes as opposed to the few Ks like we do on computer screens.
No, I cannot.
Well, send it anyway, and I can maybe enhance it.
Well, let me show you what I've got. I can show it to you on the screen pretty easily. It's just on my Facebook page.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we can pull it off. I can do wonders. I'm gonna stop the recording now, Chris.
All right.
So Becky, well, thank you very much, Chris. Chris
You're
Kueny.
welcome.